Hello, friends. We all need hope right now, and my prayer is that this parable of Jesus today will pour in more hope into your heart, your life, who you are, than what you had when we started. Here's our parable for today. Tom flopped down at the bar. He ordered a drink. He didn't know if he wanted to scream, to break a chair, pound the bar, drink himself into oblivion, or just give up on life. He just hated how hard life was right now. Ben looked at Tom, and Ben could see it all over his body. The slumped shoulders, the tight cheeks, the tension. Ben said, "How bad is it?" Tom closed his eyes and he said, I don't even know where to begin. I don't know where to begin. I just feel like life won't let up. I want to call timeout, and every square inch of my life just feels like a fight right now. I'm so tired of my job. My boss switches between treating us terribly and then just disappearing. And then we're all trying to figure out what to do. And if my coworkers were easy to get along with, it might be fine, but nobody knows who's in charge, and everyone's butting heads, and it's just a mess. And so work is just not fulfilling at all right now, and I'm so tired of my commute. And Mary, well, she heard back from her doctor, and it is cancer, stage 3, and we don't know yet what the treatment plan is or what her chances are. Mary was Tom's wife. Tom goes on, he says, before we found out, we were fighting so much. And then we got this news, and now it just feels really fragile. And we're still trying to get a handle on our son's depression. He went pretty dark there, and it's hard to see him suffering. It's hard to watch. We're still working on it with his doctors, and it doesn't help that there's this group of kids at school that they're making these pretty overt racist jokes, and it just beats him down and disturbs him further, and he's struggling to make friends. And my folks came over last weekend, and it feels like a Cold War with them. They Years ago, they thought that I shouldn't have married Mary, uh, shotgun wedding and all, and I feel like they still won't accept her. I think my mom has a permanent grudge against her. Like, she thinks that I I'm not. She blames Mary for me not living up to my potential. Like, uh, instead of going to college, I married Mary, and things are hard enough between Mary and I without my folks making all their remarks and all their rude, snide comments. And then Mary's medical bills, they're starting to come in, and I know they're going to pile up. And then there's COVID. I just lost a couple of friends to COVID, and I don't think that I've even begun to process what it means losing them. I don't know. Tom stared into his drink, said, and I've been hitting the booze too hard. I really haven't said that to anyone except you right now, and I'm just ashamed of the way that I'm coping. Uh, I don't want to be a closet alcoholic, but I feel like I ran out of steam to roll with the punches anymore. And man, it just feels like I'm getting hit while I'm down, and all I have energy for is to find something that'll make me feel better. And then I drink, and I don't really even feel any better. I just feel ashamed. And I just don't know why life it got so dark. And I just want to call time out. I want to, it's not just time out. It's like I want to start this thing over. Well, Ben put his hand on Tom's shoulder. He just breathed in for a moment. He said, man, even one of those things, just one of those things, would be a lot. But all of them together, man, that's so heavy. Tom smiled. He said, yeah, that's putting it lightly. I mean, it just all feels so dark. I'm not one of those witch hunt types of people. I'm not. I've always thought the witch hunt stuff was just a form of labeling someone who's not like everyone else. And so when people start talking about the devil and stuff like that, I just roll my eyes. I'm like, oh, that's weird religious stuff. It's outdated fiction, and and that's kind of the way I've always thought. But Tom continued. He said, right now the darkness feels so close. Like sometimes I feel like I can feel that hot breath of evil just breathing on the back of my neck. The darkness has never felt so real and so oppressive. And if I didn't know any better, I'd say it felt alive. But I don't believe in that kind of stuff. Ben nodded. He said, "Man, that is a good way of putting it. Like on the one hand, you don't believe that the darkness is alive, and on the other hand, you can feel it breathing down your neck." He said, "You already know that I'm into Jesus, and Jesus certainly treated the darkness like it was alive, but I certainly get what you're saying, where it feels really weird to consider that this universe has more than just like molecules bumping into molecules. It feels really weird to think there's more going on than that. When I first considered that, it was weird to me too, and it still is kind of weird to think there's more going on. It's kind of goosebumpy or something." Yeah, Tom said. He said, I remember learning about what Thomas Jefferson did with the Bible. He took a pair of scissors and he cut out all of the supernatural stories, all of the miracles and the healing lepers and casting out demons and virgin birth and resurrection, all that kind of stuff. And then he took all those pieces and he glued them back together. You know, I'm pretty sure you can buy a copy on Amazon, the Thomas Jefferson Bible or something, a book of ethics for people who really don't believe in miracles and supernatural. Uh, Tom says, I think that's more my style. Like I just want the world to be good without needing to believe in all that supernatural stuff. But it just has me messed up right now because everything feels so dark. Ben said, "Yeah, that makes sense." And I get that feeling. He said, "I'm really intrigued by the whole good and evil witch hunt thing. Um, but I also don't want to go down a rabbit hole if what you actually need to do is like not just go down that rabbit hole, but just talk about your experience right now." Tom said, "No, no, it would actually be nice to go down that rabbit hole, at least a little bit, because I've been going down that rabbit hole by myself. Like by myself, the thing in the back of my mind is like, is there some evil force that's trying to ruin my life right now?" And so we can go down that rabbit hole. Like I might as well go down it with someone else. Okay, said Ben. You used the word evil. Do you actually believe that there is such a thing as evil? Well, of course I do, said Tom. Like like the Holocaust or genocide or racism or human trafficking or wars or the residency schools with Native Americans, stuff like that. Like that's evil. Ben said, "Yeah, I agree, but to play devil's advocate, no pun intended, uh, if there is no such thing as God or as a devil, uh, how do you call anything good or evil? Like if the universe is just molecules bumping into one another, and there is no power behind however this world came to be, and if that's all there is, if it's just survival of the fittest, then shouldn't we say that all those things that you're calling evil, the Holocaust, the wars, the genocide, the systemic racism, shouldn't we say all that stuff is actually just survival of the fittest? This is going to sound awful, said Ben, but if survival of the fittest is all there is in this world, then when the world is cutthroat, should we be complaining or protesting or crying injustice? Or should we just shrug our shoulders and just keep trying to scramble to the top of the pile? Like, if the world is just molecules that are bumping together and all it is survival of the fittest, then does it really make sense to be helping the vulnerable and the weak and the oppressed and looking out for those folks and trying to take care of them and serve them? Unless there's something significant you can get out of it, unless there's a way that will get you farther ahead. So, like, survival of the fittest is this world where it's just like might makes right. And I bring that question up because it is part of why I find Jesus so intriguing. Um, if if it's only survival of the fittest and it's only molecules just bumping into one another, it really doesn't make sense to try to loose the chains of injustice and serve the least and speak up for the vulnerable and the oppressed and share your food and provide for the poor and clothe the naked. All that stuff would just be working against survival of the fittest. But my guts tell me that human trafficking and white supremacy and the Holocaust and all that stuff is wrong. It's evil. And I just know it. And I want to help the vulnerable. And so Jesus gives me this way of understanding the world that actually names those things as evil and makes sense of caring for the vulnerable and the oppressed. And it works for me. Well, Tom's wheels were turning. He was thinking. He said, "Yeah, I've visited some of those Holocaust memorials. I visited one of the residency schools. I've witnessed racism. There is no way that I could look at those things and say, ah, yeah, that's just survival of the fittest. No, I can't say that. I look at those things and I say they are evil because I'm certain that it's not just might makes right. I know that." So Ben explored further. He said, "Okay, so who or what is behind evil? Like what what defines evil?" Tom shrugged. I I don't know. I don't want to be a witch hunt kind of person. But then when it feels like every square inch of your life is a battle and it feels like you're losing, you start to wonder what is going on in this universe. Ben said, "Well, there's this fascinating story about this time when Jesus was the target, the subject of a witch hunt. And of course, it's one of those stories that Thomas Jefferson cut out of the Bible. But you want to hear it?" Tom says, "Sure. I mean, I think Thomas Jefferson also said that he suspected that black people were inferior to white people. So it's not like I'm letting Thomas Jefferson call all the shots here. I'm not sure he understood the value of the things he wanted to cut out. So yeah, let's hear it. Ben says, "All right." So Jesus was becoming quite popular, and not only because of his teaching, but because of all kinds of supernatural things, healing people, casting out demons, miracles, all that kind of stuff. And it was making the religious bigwigs pretty jealous. And so they declare this witch hunt against Jesus. They start telling all of the peasant folks that the spirit that Jesus is using to do all of these incredible things is actually the spirit of Beelzebul. Beelzebul's the prince of demons. And so they're accusing Jesus of sorcery, which sounds it sounds silly to us, but in Jesus' day, if you stick that label on someone, you're a sorcerer, it would have completely ostracized him from his entire community. So it was a big accusation. And so Jesus calls the religious bigwigs over and he says to them, he says, a kingdom divided against itself is going to be ruined. And every city, every household that is divided against itself, it's going to fall. How can Satan drive out Satan? If Satan opposes himself and is divided, he's not going to stand. He cannot stand. His end has come. So if I'm driving out demons by Beelzebul, then by whom do your followers drive them out? But if I'm driving out demons by the finger of God, well, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. Tom listened. You know, I've heard that line before. The line about a kingdom divided. I think people use that in various places because I've heard that before. And what Jesus says there does make sense in the sense that, yeah, why would Jesus use evil power to rid the world of evil if there is such a thing as evil? What that wouldn't make sense. Ben jumped in. He says, I completely agree. And you know, it's weird how many Christians I've heard talk about God in kind of a backwards way from this. They talk about God like God does use evil power. So their life gets super dark, it gets really hard, and they start saying, "Oh man, I must just be really hard-headed, and God must be trying to get through to me," as if God is using evil power against them. Tom responds, like, "Well, yeah, that doesn't make a ton of sense according to what Jesus is saying." Ben says, "No, it's not consistent," and and I think that's what Jesus is actually getting at. You know, the religious bigwigs, they're accusing Jesus of performing these exorcisms and these miracles, but they aren't anti-exorcism because these religious bigwigs, these Pharisees, they had their own exorcists. They had their own team of people doing that. And so if casting out demons means you're in league with the devil, well, you could say the same thing about the religious bigwigs. They're doing the same thing. And so it's inconsistent. And Jesus is pointing that out. And so he tells them this story or this parable. It's like this picture of, I think it sums up what Jesus sees himself doing. Jesus saw the world like a dark basement, and it's full of victims, these captives who are they're all tied up. They're enslaved by this evil villain, this tyrant, and the victims cannot overpower him. And so Jesus says, how can anyone enter a strong man's house and carry off his possessions if the strong man is fully armed and he's guarding his house? But when someone stronger attacks and overpowers him, then he binds the strong man. He ties him up, and then he takes away the armor in which the man trusted, and then he plunders his house. Jesus goes on, he says, whoever is not with me is against me. Whoever does not gather with me scatters. Truly I tell you, every sin, every kind of sin and slander can be forgiven, but blasphemy against the Spirit, it will never be forgiven. It's an eternal sin. So imagine it, Ben says, imagine it. This vicious sociopath in a dark basement has hordes of people tied up. Rescue attempts have been made, but they've failed. Somehow, a rescuer overpowers the villain and ties him up, and the villain's struggling against the ropes. He's trying to get free, and meanwhile, the rescuer is running all around, untying people, but their legs and arms have fallen asleep, and it makes it hard to move, and they're weak, and they're suffering from malnutrition. And the rescuer doesn't just say, run for it, save yourselves. No, he says, help me, start untying people with me. Because the rescuer wants to free as many people as fast as he can. And so now more and more people are untying one another because the rescuer wants to untie everyone. But then the rescuer happens upon a victim who starts screaming, what is wrong with you? Why are you trying to kidnap me from my home? Why are you trying to give me a different life? Are you some kind of an evil monster? Get out of here. Stop grabbing me. The rescuer says, no, I'm trying to untie you. I'm trying to rescue you. But the victim starts screaming to all of the crowded basement of captives. This guy is an evil monster. Do not let him touch you. He's trying to kidnap you and take you away. Well, what can the rescuer do for a captive who really doesn't want to be rescued? For someone who says that the power of the rescuer, they say, well, that's evil. You know, Jesus says, the one who is not gathering with me, they're scattering. See, Jesus wants to rescue the entire world, forgive the entire world, every kind of sin. And so he starts his entire ministry with this announcement saying, the Spirit of the Lord is on me. He's anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor, to proclaim freedom for prisoners, to recovery of sight for the blind, set the oppressed free. But if someone thinks that that spirit filling Jesus is an evil spirit, well, they're kind of like that victim in the basement refusing to be rescued. How do you help them without violating their will? Tom said. You know, that's fascinating perspective. I can see how Jesus offers a motivation to care for the most vulnerable and oppressed. And I wonder if you play Thomas Jefferson with the Bible and you chop out all these kinds of stories, are you even left with any kind of a real reason to care for the most vulnerable? Ben responded, he said, well, if you don't play Thomas Jefferson with the Bible, then this is the way that Jesus understands the world. It's like a basement full of tied up victims, captives with this evil villain, and they cannot overpower him. But Jesus believes that he is able to overpower that villain, the evil, the darkness. And then Jesus gets other people involved in untying one another. And so on numerous occasions, Jesus tells his disciples, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in the heavens, and whatever you loose on earth, untie, will be loosed in the heavens. The ancient Christians saw the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus as the ultimate plundering act. It was Jesus descending into death, descending into Hades, into that dark basement, and destroying the gates of Hades and releasing the captives with the good news, leading them out. The Apostle Paul, he's got that same kind of picture. For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness. He has brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. Having disarmed the powers and the authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. Ben continued. He said, I guess the question is, how do you make sense of your experience, the stuff that you were telling me about? Like, if the world isn't a dark basement, if there is no villain, if it's only survival of the fittest, and your life is just the accumulation of your choices, I guess we shouldn't look for any help from the outside. And I don't know if it helps to complain when the world feels dark and cutthroat. It just is what it is. And so if that's the case, then it's like, man, just put your head down and soldier on. I know it sounds terrible, but that's kind of all there is. So that's one option. But if there's a darkness, if there's an evil, if there's a power out there that is infecting the world systems and entangling and enslaving people's choices and lives and causing destruction, and if that is somehow real, if there are unseen forces, then we do need help from the outside. And we do need divine assistance, and we do need support from beyond us. And if that's the case, then hearing this whisper that, hey, there's someone who can overpower the darkness and the evil, the strong man, well, then that sounds like hope. It sounds like good news. Tom breathed a sigh. It's fascinating. My mind is kind of spinning. Uh, I think what's hard for me about this, he said, is so if I consider that there is some kind of a force out there, like there is some kind of evil and there is some kind of good, some kind of God, then I don't really know where to draw the lines between the choices I make and and evil. Like, so all the fights with my wife Mary and whatever my part of that is, taking a job that I hate instead of going to college, the Cold War with my folks, systemic racism, my drinking too much, on and on. The question it makes me ask is, okay, where do my choices end, and where does evil begin? Who's responsible for what? Because the all or nothing stuff, it makes me uncomfortable. Ben nodded. He says, yeah, I get that. I am not comfortable with the all or nothing stuff either, where we just, like, we look at all the problems and we blame them on the devil. So I ask the same question that you're asking, and I don't know exactly how to answer that question. If I have to say, well, where are the lines and who's responsible for what? But Ben says I can tell you a super important way that I handle that question, and it's with a prayer. Uh, this super short phrase that Jesus taught his disciples to pray, which is deliver us from evil. Deliver us from evil. And when I say that, I'm not claiming to understand the evil. I'm not claiming to understand the darkness. I'm just saying there are times when I can feel the darkness breathing down my neck, and I can just feel that there's something that's looking for someone to devour, and it's speaking lies, and it's trying to steal and kill and destroy. And I know that I need help from the outside. I know that I need divine assistance. And so I pray, help, deliver us from evil. Tom was taking it all in. He stared into his beer. He was deep in thought. He was in pain, quiet for a very long time. He just felt felt so bound up. He felt so enslaved. The darkness, it felt so real. Ben sat there, just silent. Moments passed. And then Tom says, to the air, to the bar, to the universe, to the heavens, to God. He just looked up and he said, help. His eyes welled up with tears. It was all he could muster. It wasn't a leap of faith. It was more like a stumbling crash. But his heart knew he needed that prayer. And it felt like the truest word that he had spoken for an extremely long time. Help. Ben's eyes just welled up with tears. He wrapped an arm around Tom. Love you, buddy. Let me get your tab. Deliver us from evil. Help. Maybe it's a prayer that you've been praying in your own life for decades. In our home, that's part of a prayer that is spoken every day. Deliver us from evil. Maybe it's a prayer you've never prayed in your entire life. We can't blame everything on the devil. It's not a witch hunt. There's not a devil under every bush. And we can't blame everything on other people, what they did and how they made us feel. And we can't discount our own choices. And yet sometimes the darkness just overpowers us. And somewhere down deep in our hearts, we know we need divine help. What if this is one of the most important prayers that you could pray every day, all along the way? Deliver us from evil. Help. Love you, friends.